The wrestling world is imploding. Brock Lesnar is fuming at Gunther. FEMI's personal life is becoming storyline material. Cody Rhodes' eye injury might change everything about his character arc. And the biggest bombshell of all, Tony Khan could be buying WWE. We're breaking down all of it right now on WWE Express, and you absolutely need to subscribe to WWE Express and ring the notification bell to catch every update on these massive developments that could reshape professional wrestling as we know it. Over the past few weeks, the wrestling landscape has been shifting in ways that seem almost too dramatic to be true. Yet here we are, staring at a collection of stories that each one individually would be enough to dominate wrestling conversation for months. But happening simultaneously? It's absolute chaos in the best way possible. Before we dive deep into each of these stories, hit that subscribe button right now so you never miss our breakdown of the biggest wrestling news, rumors, and speculation that matter. Let's start with the Brock Lesnar and Gunther situation. These are two of the most dominant forces in professional wrestling, and the tension between them has been building for some time. Lesnar represents a different era of wrestling dominance, a style built on raw power and athleticism that defined a generation. Gunther, meanwhile, represents a newer approach to dominance, a wrestler who has systematically proven himself through brutal, methodical wrestling matches that emphasize technical superiority and European wrestling fundamentals. The clash between these two philosophies is absolutely fascinating from a booking perspective. If WWE is genuinely exploring tension or even animosity between Lesnar and Gunther, it opens the door to one of the most compelling matches possible. What makes this interesting isn't just the physical matchup, it's what it represents about the wrestling landscape. Lesnar's potential frustration could stem from seeing a younger wrestler adopting a style and an approach that challenges his legacy. Gunther's perspective might be that Lesnar represents an older way of doing things that doesn't align with how modern wrestling should be presented. This tension, whether real or storyline-based, has the potential to create genuine intrigue about what happens next between these two titans. Now let's shift to FEMI and his personal life becoming wrestling storyline material. In modern wrestling, the line between a wrestler's personal existence and their professional character has become increasingly blurred. If FEMI's relationship status or personal situation is being incorporated into his wrestling narrative, it speaks to how WWE is building him as a complete character. Wrestlers who have depth beyond the ring, who have lives and relationships and personal stakes, often become more compelling to audiences. The question becomes how WWE handles this sensitively while still leveraging it for storytelling purposes. Done right, incorporating elements of a wrestler's personal life creates investment. Fans feel like they're getting to know the real person beneath the character. That connection often translates to stronger reactions and deeper engagement with their matches and feuds. It's a delicate balance, but when executed well, it's incredibly effective. The Cody Rhodes eye injury angle is another story entirely. Cody's journey in WWE has been about redemption, about proving he belongs in the main event picture, about his storyline with his family legacy. If he's now dealing with a legitimate eye injury or if WWE is incorporating an eye injury into his character narrative, it changes everything about how we perceive his character going forward. A wrestler with an eye injury brings a vulnerability to the character that wasn't there before. It creates sympathy. It makes fans root harder for him because they're worried about his well-being. From a storytelling perspective, it also creates opportunities for opponents to exploit that vulnerability, to work the injury, to make audiences genuinely concerned about his ability to compete at the highest level. The psychological dimension this adds to Cody's character is significant. He's no longer just the redemption story. He's now the underdog who's literally fighting with a disadvantage. That changes how audiences perceive his victories and creates narrative tension that didn't exist previously. Then there's the Tony Khan buying WWE rumor, and this is where things get absolutely wild. Tony Khan is the owner of AEW, a company that was built specifically as an alternative to WWE. The idea that he could be acquiring WWE itself is almost too surreal to contemplate, yet here we are discussing it. If there's any legitimacy to this speculation, it would represent one of the most seismic shifts in professional wrestling history. It would mean that the alternative promotion's owner becomes the owner of the establishment promotion. The implications for how wrestling is booked, presented, and distributed would be enormous. It would change everything about the wrestling landscape we've known for decades. Now, we should be clear that this is speculation and rumor at this point, but the fact that people are even discussing it seriously tells you something about how the wrestling business has evolved and how perception of power structures in wrestling has shifted. What ties all of these stories together is that they represent wrestling at its most compelling. We have dominant forces colliding, personal lives becoming narrative fodder, vulnerabilities being exposed, and power structures potentially shifting. These aren't just wrestling stories. They're human stories told through the lens of professional wrestling. They're about legacy, about respect, about power, about identity, and about what it means to be at the top of this industry. The thing about wrestling news cycles is that they move incredibly fast. Stories break, rumors spread, speculation builds, and the landscape shifts almost before you've had time to process what's happening. That's why staying informed through dedicated wrestling analysis channels like WWE Express is so important. We break down these stories not just as entertainment gossip, but as narrative developments that matter to how professional wrestling is presented and perceived. Each of these stories deserves attention because each one tells us something about the current state of professional wrestling. Lesnar vs. Gunther tells us about style and philosophy in wrestling. OBA FEMI's personal narrative tells us about character development and investment. CODY Rhodes' eye injury angle tells us about vulnerability and psychological storytelling. And Tony Khan potentially buying WWE tells us about the evolving business structure of professional wrestling itself. If you want to stay on top of these kinds of massive wrestling developments, subscribe to WWE Express right now. We break down the news, the rumors, the speculation, and most importantly, what it all means for the future of professional wrestling. Subscribe to WWE Express today and join a community of wrestling fans who care deeply about understanding the stories being told and the business decisions being made. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next WWE Express video.